finally ready to export my scene from Blender over into a file format that we can upload into Sketchfab. There's a couple of housekeeping things that we need to do before we get started. So let's first by examining our outliner and be really confident that all the materials that we want to come along for the trip in the FBX file are applied and are currently active on our scene. It should be, but it's always good just to kind of double check before we send it out. So here's the branch, and I've just traveled over into the material properties section of my properties panel, and I'm looking right here. We get the branch. We can see all of its all of its shader graph nodes down here in the bottom. Now, unfortunately, all of this graph stuff is not going to come along for the ride. So if you have spent some time customizing your graph to make it a little bit more specific to your scene, you can add some adjustment nodes and what have you. None of that stuff is going to come along for the ride, unfortunately. Sketchfab is an entirely image-based rendering application, so there's some basic material characteristics that we'll be able to adjust, but it really relies on the images that we created over in the Substance Painter to describe the details of our model. So I'm just going to continue just double checking it. I'm looking to make sure that all of my materials have been applied to the objects that are going to be included in the FBX file. Of course, I got my turtle. Here's the body, and its child object is the shell. And finally, the water and everything is looking good. So I'm pretty pleased with all of this. I'm ready to rock and roll. And the next thing that we need to do is select the objects that we want to export out. So I'm holding down the Control key as I click on all these objects. Basically, I want to select everything except the lights and the cameras that are currently inside of this Blender scene. With those objects selected, we can start the export process. We're going to be using the FBX file format to export and to transport all of our information from one scene file to another. Sketchfab entirely is built around the FBX file format, so it's the preferred format of choice. I'm going to save this as the exact same name as my blend file, just with the FBX in there. I found it to be a really great workflow to include the same naming conventions between your Blender file and the FBXs. That way, if you ever need to go back and make a change, you know precisely which blend file to return to. So this is a good one to keep inside of my media management system. In addition, over here in our output properties, we want to make sure that we're doing just the meshes. And we also want to make sure that we turn off the animation. And I am going to, we also want to limit to selected objects. So those are the three that we really need to make sure we've changed, because we only want to export the objects that have been selected. We just want to send the mesh objects, and we want to make sure that we don't send any animation information into the system as well. Now, if this bake animation was on, you're going to get an animation clip over inside of Sketchfab. It just adds to the weight of the file itself. Makes it a little bit more difficult to work with, but not too much. At this resolution and size and scale, it's not going to be too much of a difference, but it's something that out of good practice I like to turn off. Okay, let's export the FBX. It only takes a second, and then we can travel over into our internet browser and begin uploading and importing this object into Sketchfab.